You paid to silence us, the orphan girls told the millionaire. Then they discover something terrible. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me which city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better. So subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The ballroom of the Grand Oakwood Hotel was brimming with elegance that September evening. 300 guests occupied tables, adorned with white orchid arrangements, awaiting the most anticipated moment of the Pennsylvanian city's annual charity gala. Arthur Blackwood, 58, adjusted his burgundy tie while mentally reviewing the speech he would deliver in a few minutes. As the owner of the most prosperous construction company in Oakwood City, he was about to receive an honor for his contributions to the local community. The businessman walked among the tables, greeting acquaintances when the master of ceremonies announced his name. Applause echoed through the hall as Arthur took the stage, feeling the familiar weight of loneliness that had accompanied him since losing Eleanor 3 years earlier. His wife had always been by his side at events like this, offering the warm smile he could never reproduce on his own. "Good evening, dear friends," Arthur began, his firm voice resonating through the microphone. "It is an honor to receive this tribute on behalf of all the employees of Blackwood Construction who work daily to..." Two small figures burst into the hall, running towards the stage. The twin girls, appearing to be about 4 years old, wore simple clothes and had messy brown hair. Their faces held a determination that contrasted with their diminutive age. "You lied," one of them shouted, pointing a small finger at Arthur. "You paid for us to be quiet." "You didn't want us," the other added, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why did you do that to us?" An awkward silence fell over the room. Arthur remained motionless behind the podium, the microphone picking up his heavy breathing. He had never seen these children before, but something in their eyes disturbed him deeply. There was an unsettling familiarity in those brown eyes that made him question his own memory. Hotel staff rushed towards the girls, but they dodged with agility, continuing to shout incomprehensible accusations. The crowd murmured restlessly, some guests rising from their chairs to get a better look at the unexpected spectacle. "Emily! Sophie! Come back here immediately!" An authoritative voice echoed from the entrance of the hall. A tall, stern woman in a religious habit approached quickly. Sister Dolores, the director of St. Clara's orphanage, had a face red with embarrassment and anger. The twins stopped upon hearing the nun's voice, but didn't move. Emily, slightly taller than her sister, kept her fists clenched as she stared at Arthur. Sophie hid behind her, but her eyes remained fixed on the businessman with a mixture of fear and accusation. "Forgive the disturbance," Sister Dolores said breathlessly, addressing the guests. "The girls ran away from the institution this afternoon. They are orphans with severe behavioral problems." Arthur watched as the nun firmly gripped the children's wrists. Something in the way Emily tried to wriggle free from the grip sparked an unexpected anger in his chest. The businessman had always been known for his explosive temper in business, but since losing Eleanor, he rarely felt such intense emotions. "Wait," Arthur said, stepping down from the stage, his voice cut through the nervous buzz of the guests. "Let me talk to them." "Sister," Dolores hesitated, clearly displeased. "Mr. Blackwood, I apologize once again. The girls are unstable. They arrived just 2 months ago and haven't adapted properly yet." Arthur knelt before the twins, bringing himself to their level. Up close, the resemblance between Emily and Sophie was striking, except for their eyes. Emily had a defiant gaze, while Sophie seemed more frightened. Both stared at him with an intensity disconcerting for such young children. "Why did you say those things?" Arthur asked softly, ignoring the whispers of the guests around him. "Because you sent us away," Emily replied, her voice trembling between courage and fear. Aunt Beatrice told us before she went to heaven you didn't want daughters." Arthur's heart skipped a few beats. Beatrice was a name he hadn't heard in years, but he vaguely recognized it as belonging to a distant cousin of Eleanor's. How did these orphan children know that name? "Come with me now," Sister Dolores ordered, pulling the girls with more force. "You've caused enough embarrassment." "Wait." Arthur stood up, a strange urgency taking hold of him. Where did they come from? How did they get to the orphanage? They were found abandoned in the central square 2 months. "Ago," the nun replied curtly. "No documents, no family. Cases like this are common, unfortunately." Sophie began to hum softly as she was dragged away. It was a gentle melody, almost a whisper, but it struck Arthur like a lightning bolt. He immediately recognized the lullaby Eleanor used to hum while tending to her orchid garden. A song she said she had learned from her grandmother, something intimate that only very close people knew. "How do you know that song?" Arthur shouted, but the girls were already being led out of the hall by the determined nun. The guests remained, in awkward silence, watching Arthur stand in the middle of the ballroom, visibly shaken. The master of ceremonies tried to resume the event, but the businessman waved for them to stop. Without a word, he left the hotel, ignoring the concerned calls of his friends. That night, in his silent apartment in downtown Oakwood City, Arthur couldn't sleep. The melody hummed by Sophie echoed in his mind, mixing with memories of Eleanor. How could 2 unknown orphans know such a personal song? And why did their accusations seem to carry a genuine pain that went beyond simple childhood delusions? 4. The first time in 3 years since he had buried his wife, Arthur felt that something important was being hidden from him, and the next morning he would begin to search for answers that would change his life forever. The morning arrived grey over Oakwood City, reflecting Arthur's state of mind as he drove through familiar streets towards St. Clara's orphanage. He had spent the night awake, tormented by the lullaby and the twins' accusations. For 3 years, he had managed to keep his pain under control through obsessive work, but that night had shattered his hard-built emotional armor. The orphanage was on the outskirts of the city, a 2-story building with peeling walls and a small yard surrounded by high fences. Arthur parked in front of the gate and watched a few children playing in the yard. He couldn't spot Emily and Sophie among them, but his presence there seemed to arouse curiosity in the little faces that turned towards him. Sister Dolores received him in her office with evident reluctance. The room was small and poorly lit, with crosses on the walls and a smell of cleaning products that couldn't completely mask the mustiness of the old walls. The nun, appearing to be in her late 50s, maintained a rigid posture that suggested years of unquestionable authority. "Mr. Blackwood, what a surprise," she said, not hiding the irritation in her voice. "I hope you haven't come here because of yesterday's incident. The girls have already been duly punished for their inappropriate conduct." "Punished how?" Arthur asked, sitting in the creaky wooden chair in front of the nun's desk. The question came out harsher than he intended, revealing the temper he tried so hard to control since Eleanor's loss. They were sent to bed without supper and spent the night reflecting on their actions in the discipline room. Sister Dolores replied coldly. "Orphan children often develop fantasies about their origins. It's typical behavior, Mr. Blackwood. Nothing to worry about." Arthur felt a tightness in his chest, imagining the 2 little girls going hungry as punishment for seeking answers about their lives. "I'd like to see them, and I want to know exactly how they got here." "That's not possible. The girls are in an adaptation period, and outside visits could hinder the process." Sister Dolores opened a drawer and pulled out a yellowish folder. They were found in the Central Square in July, completely alone. The person who brought them said they had been wandering for hours, crying and calling for someone named Beatrice. The name hit Arthur again like a physical blow. Beatrice had been Eleanor's second cousin, a simple woman who lived on a farm on the outskirts of the city. He had only met her once or twice at family gatherings, but vaguely remembered Eleanor mentioning her occasionally. "And you didn't investigate who this Beatrice was?" Arthur insisted. "Mr. Blackwood, we have limited resources and many children to care for. We did what we could, but we found no Beatrice in the region with a connection to the girls." The nun closed the folder with a sharp movement. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have many duties." Arthur knew he was being dismissed, but a growing stubbornness kept him glued to the chair. "I want to make a donation to the orphanage, a substantial amount. In return, I would just like to talk to the girls occasionally." Sister Dolores's eyes gleamed with interest for a moment before resuming their usual coldness. "What kind of amount, Mr. Blackwood?" "Enough to completely renovate this building. New facilities, equipment, better food for the children." Arthur watched the nun's reaction carefully. "But I need to understand why those girls know me." "They don't know you," Sister Dolores replied quickly, perhaps too quickly. "They are childhood fantasies, as I said. But a donation of this magnitude would be very welcome. We could arrange some supervised visits." At that moment, sharp cries echoed from the upper floor of the building. It was clearly a child in distress, and Arthur immediately recognized one of the voices as either Emily's or Sophie's. He instinctively stood up from his chair, but Sister Dolores quickly blocked him. "Just a fight between children. Nothing to worry about," she said, but her nervousness was palpable. "Perhaps it would be better to schedule a meeting to discuss the details of the donation. How about next week?" The cries stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence that Arthur found even more disturbing. "I'd prefer to sort this out today. I can transfer an initial sum this afternoon." Greed won over caution in the nun's eyes. "Very well, but the visits must be scheduled and always supervised. And Mr. Blackwood, please, do not encourage the girls' fantasies. They need to accept their current reality." Arthur agreed with a nod, but his suspicions about the orphanage only intensified. There was something deeply wrong with how Sister Dolores handled the situation. A haste to dismiss the girls' claims that seemed to go beyond simple administrative practicality. As he left the building, Arthur decided to walk around the property. The backyard was smaller than it seemed from the front, surrounded by high walls that blocked the view of neighboring houses. It was there he found Emily and Sophie, sitting alone on a deteriorated wooden bench, both with red, swollen eyes from crying. "Hi," he said, softly, approaching slowly as if dealing with wounded animals. The girls looked up, surprised. Sophie immediately hid behind her sister, but Emily faced him with the same determination as the night before. "Did you come to get us?" Emily asked, her small voice filled with a hope that broke Arthur's heart. "I came to talk to you," he replied, sitting on the ground to be at their level. "About what you said yesterday, about Beatrice." Both of their eyes filled with tears upon hearing the name. Sophie came out from behind her sister and whispered, "Aunt Beatrice said you were our daddy, but that you didn't want us because we were babies when Mommy went to heaven." The words hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. Beatrice had told the girls he was their father. How was that possible if he had never seen these children before? And how did Beatrice know details about his life with Eleanor? "Aunt Beatrice sang Mommy's song every night," Emily continued. "She said Mommy sang it to us when we were tiny, before she went to heaven to meet the angels." "What song?" Arthur asked, though he already knew the answer. Sophie began to hum the same melody from the previous night. It was exactly the lullaby Eleanor used to hum, note for note, word for word. A song she claimed to have learned from her grandmother and had never taught to anyone else, except, "Where is Beatrice now?" Arthur asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "She went to heaven like Mommy," Emily replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She got very sick and couldn't take care of us anymore. That's why we came looking for you. But the sister said you weren't our real daddy." Arthur felt the world spin around. Him, If Beatrice had died recently and the girls were found in July, it meant they really did know Eleanor's cousin. But how could Beatrice have these children? And why would she say he was their father? "Emily!" "Sophie!" Sister Dolores's authoritative voice cut through the air. The nun approached quickly, clearly annoyed to find Arthur talking alone with the girls. "You know you're not supposed to talk to strangers without supervision." "He's not a stranger," Emily protested. "He's our—" "Silence," Sister Dolores ordered. "Go back inside immediately." As the girls reluctantly walked away, Sophie looked back and whispered to Arthur, "Aunt Beatrice said you have a house with lots of flowers like the ones Mommy liked. Is it true?" Arthur couldn't answer. Eleanor had cultivated orchids throughout their marriage, turning their home into a veritable garden. How could this 4-year-old child know that? And more importantly, what other truths about his life did these girls carry with them? 3 weeks passed since Arthur began his regular visits to St. Clara's orphanage. Officially, he was supervising the renovations he had funded. New windows, fresh paint, modern kitchen equipment. In reality, every hammer that echoed through the walls was an excuse to watch Emily and Sophie trying to decipher the mystery they represented. During these visits, he discovered disturbing details about the twins' routine. Sister Dolores kept them separated from the other children for most of the day, claiming they were a negative influence due to their delusions about family. Worse still, he observed that the nun administered medication to the girls twice a day, small white pills that left them drowsy and apathetic. "They're special vitamins," Sister Dolores had explained when Arthur questioned her. "Orphaned children often suffer from nutritional deficiencies. Specialized medical care is necessary." But Arthur noticed that only Emily and Sophie received these medicines, and always after episodes where they talked about Beatrice or demonstrated knowledge about his personal life. His suspicion grew with each visit, especially when he caught the nun burning papers in the backyard on a rainy October afternoon. "Just old documents," she said nervously when he asked, but Arthur could see fragments of children's drawings among the ashes. Drawings of a house with many flowers, exactly like his former home with Eleanor. The breaking point came on a stormy Thursday when Arthur arrived earlier than usual for an inspection of the works. He found Emily locked, alone in the discipline room, feverish and delirious, while Sophie cried inconsolably in the hallway. "What happened?" he demanded, his famous anger finally exploding in front of Sister Dolores. "Emily had a hysterical fit this morning, screaming about her imaginary mother and you," the nun replied coldly. "I had to isolate her to protect the other children. She's sick. She needs a doctor, not punishment. Mr. Blackwood, please do not interfere with our educational methods. We have experience with traumatized children." But Arthur had already made a decision that had been maturing for weeks. That same afternoon, he called Natalie. Reed, a private investigator he had hired years ago to solve delicate problems in his company. Natalie was a woman in her early 40s, a former detective who specialized in complex family cases. "I need you to investigate a woman named Beatrice who lived on the outskirts of Oakwood City," Arthur said during the meeting in his downtown office. "She was a cousin of my late wife, Eleanor. Apparently she died a few months ago." Natalie jotted down the details in her worn leather notebook. "Any specific reason for the investigation?" Arthur hesitated, then decided to tell her everything. The twins, accusations, the lullaby, the impossible knowledge about his personal life. Natalie listened in silence, occasionally asking pointed questions that demonstrated her experience in similar cases. "I'll start with the county records," she said at the end. "If this Beatrice existed and died recently, there will be records. I'll also check hospitals and clinics where she might have been treated." While Natalie began her investigation, Arthur tried to process a disturbing discovery he had made at the house he had shared with Eleanor. After months of avoiding the place, he had finally decided to sell the property and went there to sort through personal belongings. In Eleanor's old room, While emptying her dresser, he found something that left him breathless. Hidden at the bottom of the last drawer was a small velvet case he had never seen before. Inside, he found a golden key and an address written on the letterhead of a clinic in Sterling City. The address was for a fertility center, and the date on the paper was from just 2 months before the accident that took Eleanor's life. Arthur held the key with trembling hands, remembering the mysterious trips Eleanor had made during that period. She had claimed they were visits to a sick aunt in Sterling City, but he had always found it strange that he couldn't accompany her. Eleanor was evasive about these trips, changing the subject whenever he asked for details. The next day, Natalie called with her first findings. Her voice was tense, carrying the kind of information that changes lives forever. "Arthur, I found records for a Beatrice Santos Carvalho. She was indeed Eleanor's cousin, and died in June of this year from complications of pneumonia. But there's something else. I found medical records indicating she cared for 2 twin girls since their birth in 2019. 2019? Arthur sat down heavily in his armchair. That was just a few months before Eleanor's accident. Exactly. And there's more. I gained access to hospital records through a contact. Beatrice listed Eleanor Blackwood as the children's biological mother on internal documents at the rural hospital where they were treated a few times. Arthur's office seemed to spin around him. That's impossible. Eleanor was never pregnant. I would have known. Arthur, there are records from the fertility clinic in Sterling City. Eleanor underwent treatments there for 2 years without your knowledge. And there's one more thing I need to tell you in person. 2 hours later, Natalie was sitting before him with a folder full of documents that would shatter everything Arthur thought he knew about his life. She opened the first page and showed him a detailed medical report. Eleanor successfully became pregnant through in vitro fertilization in March 2019. Twins. But here's the part that will shock you. She gave birth in September of the same year, but the children were handed over to Beatrice's care immediately after delivery. Why? Arthur's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. According to the records I obtained, Eleanor suffered from severe postpartum depression. Beatrice was a retired nurse and offered to care for the babies temporarily, but temporary became permanent when Natalie paused, clearly reluctant to continue. When what? Arthur leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. When Eleanor attempted to take her own life for the first time 2 months after giving birth. She was discreetly hospitalized and treated for severe depression. Beatrice kept the children to protect them, and apparently Eleanor agreed it was for the best, at least until she recovered. The words hit Arthur like physical blows. Eleanor had attempted suicide. She had given birth to his daughters, and he knew nothing? How was this possible? There's more, Natalie continued, turning another page. I found records that Eleanor visited the girls secretly, once or twice a month. Beatrice documented these visits in a personal diary I obtained from one of her neighbors. And I never knew anything, Arthur murmured, guilt and shock mixing in his chest. Arthur, there's one last thing. Something that might explain why the girls accused you that night. Natalie took a deep breath before continuing. According to Beatrice's notes, Eleanor planned to tell you the truth on the girl's 4th birthday. She had been preparing herself psychologically for it with the help of a therapist. The accident happened 2 weeks before the planned date. Arthur remained silent for long minutes, processing the magnitude of the revelations. His daughters, because now he knew they were his daughters, had grown up believing he had consciously rejected them. Eleanor had carried this burden alone for years, fighting a depression he hadn't even noticed. And now they were in an orphanage, medicated and mistreated, while he finally discovered the truth that had come too late. I need to get them out of there, he said finally, rising from his chair. I need to tell them the truth. Arthur, wait. Natalie closed the folder and looked at him seriously. There's something else about the orphanage you need to know before you act rashly. Sister Dolores is selling children, Natalie said bluntly, opening a second folder containing photographs and documents. I uncovered an illegal adoption scheme she's been running for at least 3 years. Orphaned children are transferred to wealthy families in other states for substantial sums. Arthur felt his blood run cold. And Emily and Sophie? They're on the list, to be separated and sent to different families in Chicago next week. The buyers have already made the initial payment. Natalie showed him forged documents with the twins' names. That's why she was medicating them so heavily. Drugged children are easier to transport and less likely to cause trouble. The anger Arthur felt turned into pure fury. For weeks, while he was trying to understand the mystery of their origins, his daughters were being prepared to be sold like merchandise. He stood up abruptly from his chair, knocking papers to the floor. We're going to get them right now. Arthur, wait. We need a plan. If we go there accusing the nun without solid evidence, she could deny everything and speed up the girl's transfer. Natalie grabbed his arm. Let me finish the investigation. In 2 days, I'll have enough evidence to involve the proper authorities. 2 days might be too late, Arthur replied, already grabbing his car keys. I'm not going to risk losing my daughters again. But when he arrived at St. Clara's orphanage that rainy November afternoon, he found the building in an uproar. Staff were running back and forth, and Sister Dolores was shouting orders from the main courtyard. Through the confusion, Arthur heard something that made his heart stop. The girls had run away. They disappeared during lunchtime, one of the caregivers explained, visibly nervous. Sister Dolores is furious. She said if we don't find them by nightfall, she'll call the authorities. Arthur knew this was a lie. The last thing Sister Dolores wanted was official attention on her activities. But he also understood that Emily and Sophie were in real danger. 2 4-year-old children alone on the streets of a city during a storm. He spent the next few hours driving through the streets of Oakwood City, checking squares, parks, and every place where small children might hide. The torrential rain limited visibility, and desperation grew with each passing minute. Where would 2 4-year-old girls go in a city they barely knew? That's when he remembered Sophie's words about the house with many flowers. His old home with Eleanor had been empty since the accident, but he still kept the keys. It was a desperate guess, but it was the only one he had. The house was in a quiet residential neighborhood, surrounded by the orchid garden Eleanor had cultivated with so much love. Arthur parked in front and immediately noticed that the side door was ajar. His heart raced when he heard faint children's voices coming from inside. He entered silently and found Emily and Sophie huddled in the living room, soaked and shivering with cold. They had found some candles Arthur kept in a drawer and were trying to warm themselves with the faint light. When they saw him, they both ran into his arms without hesitation. "Daddy!" Sophie cried, using the word for the first time with total conviction. "We knew you would come." "How did you get here?" Arthur asked, hugging the 2 small bodies against his chest, feeling their wet clothes and trembling frames. "Aunt Beatrice gave us this," Emily said, showing him a golden key identical to the one he had found among Eleanor's belongings. She said, if we ever needed to run away from the ugly house, we should come to the House of Flowers. Arthur held the key with trembling hands. Beatrice had prepared the girls for this moment, giving them an escape route that would lead them directly to him. Even in her last days, she had protected Eleanor's daughters. "Aunt Beatrice told us Mommy lived here with you," Sophie continued, looking around the room with wide eyes. "She said Mommy planted all the flowers outside to make you happy. And she said you didn't know about us because Mommy got very sad after we were born," Emily added, her voice small but determined. "But that you would want us when you found out we were your real daughters." The tears Arthur had suppressed for weeks finally fell. He knelt on the floor and held the two girls' faces in his hands, looking into the brown eyes he now recognized as identical to Eleanor's. "Emily, Sophie, I want you more than anything in the world," he said, his voice broken with emotion. "And I'm so sorry I didn't know sooner. If I had known you existed, I would have never left you alone." "You did know," a soft voice said from behind him. Arthur turned and saw Natalie in the doorway, holding a yellowed envelope. Her face was solemn, carrying the weight of a final revelation. "I found this in Beatrice's room, hidden inside a Bible," she continued, entering the room. "It's a letter from Eleanor to you, dated 1 week before the accident." With trembling hands, Arthur opened the envelope and read the words his wife had written in careful script. "My dearest Arthur, I know you always said you didn't want children because of the pains of your own childhood, but our love created 2 miracles I couldn't deny. Emily and Sophie have existed for 4 years, growing up away from us while I fought the darkness that took over my mind after their birth. Beatrice protected them when I couldn't protect them from myself, but now I'm ready. On their birthday, in 2 weeks, I will bring our daughters home, and I hope you can forgive my fear and help me be the mother they deserve. They have your smile, my love, and they sing my song every night, waiting to meet the father they carry in their hearts. With all my love and hope, Eleanor." Arthur finished reading the letter and finally understood the full dimension of the tragedy that had shaped their lives. Eleanor had planned to reveal everything, to reunite the family she had created in secret. The accident had robbed her of the chance to right the wrongs of the past, but had left her daughters with a path back home. "Sister, Dolores has found our location," Natalie said, watching through the window. "I saw her car on the street. We have to get out of here." But Arthur didn't move. For the first time in 3 years, he felt complete. He held his daughters in his arms, in the house he had built with Eleanor, surrounded by the orchids she had planted for them. He wouldn't run anymore. "Let her come," he said, standing up with Emily and Sophie still clinging to him. "I have all the evidence I need. 2 daughters who are finally home, and a promise to Eleanor that I intend to keep." 6 months later, the House of Orchids was a home again. Arthur had won legal custody of the twins after Sister Dolores was arrested for child trafficking, and he was learning to be a father with a patience he never knew he possessed. Emily maintained her determined personality, but now she directed that strength toward protecting her sister and exploring every corner of her new home. Sophie, more timid, had discovered a talent for caring for the orchids, spending hours in the garden talking softly to the flowers, just as her mother did. Every night, before bed, Arthur sang them the lullaby Eleanor had taught them, and the 3 voices blended in the melody that had guided 2 little girls back home. Because sometimes families are created not just by blood, but by the love that survives even the most painful secrets and finds its way through the darkest storms. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.